Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and creatures of the internet. Emily is here, and Vital Frontiers is here. Excellent. So I'm doing this from my desk today. Usually, and nobody joined. Nobody joined. If you change your name to everyone joined, to everyone, then it will say everyone joined. So there's somebody that joined the call called nobody. Hello, folks. Usually I do this on a little desk I set up outside on the front porch. But today the garbage trucks are swinging by and collecting our trash. It's so easy. Tyler joined. It's so easy to forget how many blessings our broken system still affords us. So over the last few days, I've been talking about this, this realization, this awareness that's percolating up in the collective conscious. And of course, the internet is a kind of mirror of our collective consciousness. That it's so dysfunctional and noisy and captured and gamified and synthetic and juvenile is an indication of our collective mind and our collective consciousness. Anyway, there's an idea percolating up, and Paul's here as well. Nice to have you here, Paul. The idea that's percolating up, that's becoming noticeable and recognizable, is a couple of things. First of all, is that whatever world order or whatever normal or whatever reality that we thought was complete is going through some form of collapse. And part of that collapse, if we look at like the mythical signature of that, because there's an argument that I live with, or there's a thought that I live with, that when things become so overwhelming, sometimes there's too much by way of information and fact and detail. And the only way to make a sense of that is through the sense of mythic, or through the sense of story. And if we try and recognize the pattern of what's happening through the lens of our stories. Hello, Chan. Nice to have you here. I'm doing it at my desk, so it's much more easy for me to see who's joining and to respond to comments and so on. So please, by all means, just dive in and get engaged. I don't just want to speak at the camera. There's nothing more soul destroying than doing that. But if we look at the medium of our mythos and our stories and our allegories, we get these words or these terms for patterns that we can now recognize, right? And one of the patterns we can recognize from our stories that's playing out at the moment is apocalypse. And of course, we're talking in archetypal language. Nobody is suggesting anything theological or religious here. It's just we recognize these tropes from our stories, and there's a very useful medium of sense making we can rely on in the realm of archetypes and tropes and so on. And I'm not the only thinker in the world that's has no problem bridging this idea of the archetypal into the what we're experiencing in our conscious reality at the moment. I mean, Jung did that. Right? The one of the Greek philosophers that basically set up the foundations for later philosophers like Plato and Socrates and Aristotle, which was a lineage. Each one of those was the mentor and the student of the other. They borrowed from the work of Heraclitus, and he was the same guy that said he spoke about this idea of everything in a state of constant change. Everything's in a state of constant flow, and even his name, actually, the root words of his name means hello, Gabby, means to be is related to this idea of something constantly changing. And when our ideas of things no longer cohere to the reality that we're experiencing. Like, in other words, we had this idea of Western democracy, we have this idea of social order, we have this idea of normal, right? And that's now coming under attack. It's unraveling in certain places. An ugly side of its truth is showing to indicate that we've been living some version of a lie. Now, this is not brand new, right? There's been elements on the internet that we've been hearing talk about these sorts of things for a long time. The spiritual community have been talking about it. There's an entire subculture on the internet that is all completely aware that a collapse is due, is coming, and that we've been living a facade or a lie for so very long. But what's happening now is this is now bleeding into mainstream news stories. People are awfully surprised at the kind of things that Donald Trump is saying. What they're fixating on, to me, is blowing my mind. Hey, Judd, which still proves that they're half asleep and they haven't quite woken up to the reality that we're all sharing. But it's now becoming apparent that whatever we counted on as our normal, and this vision of this progressive trajectory that humanity was always on, that all technological advancement, for example, equals progress, right? The certainty and the simplicity of these kind of stories is coming under attack, and it's unraveling. And if we look to our mythic tropes for context or for explanation or to recognize what's going on, to make a sense of it, right? We can analyze things to death, and everyone's got commentary on it, and everyone's got a thought and a take and an opinion. But to actually understand all of this chaos and all of this mess without having to grasp or make contact with all of the detail, because that's now impossible. There's too much now. We turn to this medium of mythos and story, and in our myths and our stories, we have this idea called an apocalypse. And what does apocalypse mean? The root words of it mean the lifting of the veil, the uncovering, the disclosure, the revelation, so that, just bear with me for a second. What is being revealed, what is being disclosed, is the ignored reality on multiple layers and levels, right? Over which we have overlaid a synthetic story which can no longer explain the reality that we're experiencing, right? Tyrannical elements, controlling elements like the corporate mindset, or like the government in power, whether it's on the left or on the right. Let's take America as an example. The farce of that can no longer explain the reality sufficiently for all the people in that country, right? If it could, there wouldn't be such a raw and powerful divide. Now, it's not the first time that America has felt or been divided, but look at what happens when that divide happens. Hey, Joe, the last time there was such a profound divide in America, there was a civil war. And the story that got wrapped over that, right, when that conflict resolved itself, was that America decided that it had gone to war with itself over the right for every man to be free. Now, it took them a long while to actually live that, and arguably they never quite got there altogether. You know, some people were less free than others. But the bullshit story was kept on and propagated, and it came out in their movies and in their pop culture and in their songs and all the rest of it. And for a long time we believed, because we wanted to believe, that there was some form of big brother watching over us, right? And now we can see that that story is unraveling, that there's an ugliness underneath that mask. And not only has that Boy Scout in our public image lost its halo, right? Now there'll be many people that come on here and go, oh, I knew it all along, and anyone would be a fool to believe in the dream. But my argument is this: the peace, that the relative peace, let's call it, that we have enjoyed, the relative freedoms that we have enjoyed, the relative human rights that Americans and others have enjoyed, is because enough people in the world believed that their dream was true. It was real enough, right? But eventually the dissonance grows and the dissonance grows and the dissonance grows. And the level of dissonance is showing its face in the mirror of our collective conscious, which is called the internet. So we have a visible mirror of our human collective consciousness, and it's the internet. And that dissonance is also showing in conflicts and the schism that's happening in the world at the moment. Because for all of the hideousness of what's happening in America at the moment, there are some people who are enjoying that. Hey, Jason, nice to have you here. There are some people who are enjoying that. There's a guy called George Tsakakrilidis. I'm going to have to type that out for you here somewhere if I can. George Tsakakrilidis. If I haven't got his name wrong, I'll actually search for it over here. And he wrote an article recently, a very short one actually, about let me see if I got his name there. I'll put the right spelling of his name down there now. Right. And in fact, I'll just send you a link to the post that I'm talking about. It's called A Nation of Carolines. And in here, he's talking about this this propensity that humans have in the face of brutal autocracy to become sympathizers and voluntary agents of a kind of propaganda, right? So this happened in Nazi Germany. This happened in Soviet-era Cold War nations. There were people who became willing agents of the occupier or the tyrant that sold their own people out and took delight in and became mouthpieces for the bullshit and the propaganda and stitched their own people up, right? And eventually when these regimes fall, and the same thing is now happening in fundamentalist religious countries, and let's just say it, in fundamentalist Islamic countries where women, let's just be honest, women's rights are marginalized in those countries and in those cultures. And yet there are women mouthpieces that come out and justify the various clothing items and prohibitive rules that women are forced to live under, and they are touted in those regimes as champions. Now, for every ugly thing that we see about that in our history, there is an example of that that's happening right now in America, and that's what his article is about. So we get people who enjoy the situation because they're sociopathic enough to be able to easily trade off the suffering that people are going through and the marginalization and the disenfranchisement of other human beings. They're able to pay that price for the reward of increasing their social capital. So there are human beings on our planet that are wired that way, right? They're sociopathic, and it's sociopathic behavior. And it doesn't just happen over there. It happens in our Western nations as well. So we're beginning to see that veil, that mask lifting. So as part of our apocalyptic trope. And what I was talking about and how I started this conversation is I'm operating at my desk today instead of recording outside. And the reason is because the garbage trucks are coming by on a Monday here. I'm speaking to you from the future in Perth, Western Australia. For me, it's already 8 a.m. on Monday morning. And my point was how easily we forget the blessings that our broken Western world still offers us. So I'm very quick to demonize the Australian government and to castigate them and to blast them for their buffoonery and their, juvenile nonsense that they chatter over, and nothing ever gets done, and it's all talk, 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 and it's a different kind of corruption that happens here to what happens everywhere else, but it's still controlled by lobbyists. It still doesn't represent the will of the people. But we're so eager to tear everything down There was a guy I also saw a minute ago here, and I might find who it was. Adam Lane. Adam Lane said, God knows it'll find me 20 minutes to find the damn thing. But he was talking about, how we don't really need governments. People can just sort of look after themselves. And my argument is that we actually can't for two reasons. Now, I'm not making an argument for bad government. I'm making an argument for better government. But there's this chatter that's going through the internet at the moment that says, our problem is government. We just need to get rid of it. And we need to go back to this human or self-autonomous collective where everyone can just get along and just not have the oversight of government. I've got two arguments against that, and they're related. The first one is, who's going to pick up the trash? Who's going to distribute medicine in the event of an illness? Who's going to distribute food in the event of a crisis? Who is going to keep any of the organizations operating in the interests of the human beings in that state? We don't do it very well at the moment, but we don't have a solution for how to do such things when the government disappears. And so as much as I love the energy of let's just tear it all down, that's not a very mature outlook, right? It's an anarchic, cathartic, adolescent, to hell with all of this, burn, 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 burn. We've got that energy inside of us. And catharsis is going to happen anyway. And anarchy is going to rise anyway. The problem is we are not really grown up and mature and realistic about what it looks like when the last vestiges of our civil coherence disappears, right? Because it's not just government that is delivering some essential services here or there, well or badly, right? It's also this civic coherence that we have, which still exists by virtue of the last lingering threads of a story that is now unraveling. Some people, your neighbors, some people only behave themselves in a civic and civil way because they still subscribe to that, or because they believe enough people subscribe to such a story. When that story disappears, right, we don't have anything to protect us from the lack of compunction, or the lack of civility, or the lack of intelligence, or the lack of wisdom, or the lack of kindness, or the lack of empathy, or the lack of reciprocity, right, of our neighbors. We're so far away from a cultural norm that can actually look after each other. So it makes it very clear what we ought to do. People are asking at the moment, what should we do? What should we do? What should we do? Nice to have you here, Tom. And please get involved in the chat, guys. I don't just want to speak into the camera. People are asking, what should we do? This is how to work out what to do, right? You count your blessings, visible and invisible. Now, there's this kind of Johari window that says there's things that I know, and there's things that I know that I know, and there's things that I don't know, and I don't know that I don't know them, right? There are things that we are ignorant of, that we're unaware of how ignorant we are. And that isn't a question of our intelligence. It's a question of our awareness and what is present and current for us. Hello, James. To call somebody ignorant is not a character assault. It's an observation of what they are aware of and what they know about, right? And not all things that we know about are symmetrical or have the same weighting. There are things that we don't know that matter more than some things that we do know, right? Let's tune in. Apology. No, you're all good, James. Jeez, dude. I'm glad you're here. So the first step is to become more aware of the blessings of your life. And I don't mean blessings in a cute, childish way. I mean, please, for the love of God, do not be oblivious to the blessings that civility and social coherence, and however much we hate our governments, that they still offer us. I do not have an answer for. I hate the supermarket. We've got a supermarket chain here called Woolworths, right? Every week you go in, there's less and less and less people actually. They've got 20 uh, cash terminals, cashiers, where you're supposed to go and put your groceries and someone else rings it up and puts it in the bag. The first thing they got rid of was the person putting stuff in the bag. The next thing they got rid of is all those 24 lanes, only 2 are open on any given day. And now there's this self-checkout thing, right? And now there's one little place you can go and get your groceries where you can sort of forcibly stand there and somebody has to come attend to you. In time, that will disappear, right? I hate it and I complain about it. But I haven't got a plan B. I can't grow all my own food. I can't get all the things that I need to at the farmer's market. Like, I still rely on supermarkets. And we're so quick to castigate and complain and bitch and moan about all the things that governments do wrong. And I'm not saying you should give them a pass for this. I'm saying if we're properly adult, right, and it's already disappeared, that service in the UK, Chan has just told us. If you want to be a real adult, if you want to be functional and helpful in this moment, the first thing you need to do is you need to be aware of such blessings that you actually cannot live comfortably without. Either make the peace internally of doing without that, or what the world or your life will look like when that is no longer there, right? Or create a plan B, right? And we don't have the wherewithal to do that. Our lives are too busy and too scattered. We don't know how to purify water. We don't know how to fetch firewood. Even if we wanted to, there isn't enough around us to fetch. We don't have fireplaces in our homes. We are just not equipped for a life in the dark ages or for a life without our modern conveniences, right? That is one of the first conversations we need to start having in a very adult way with ourselves, right? Which gets me to the second reason why I say we're not ready for operating without these kind of archetypal mommy and daddy structures that we call governments. All our hierarchical structures, from church to corporate to sports clubs to governments, operates on this very old human model of a hierarchical structure psychologically based on a daddy or a mummy or a parent figure at the top. And sometimes that's been replaced by more sophisticated, complex archetypes like king or emperor or priest or take your pick. But fundamentally, James just said the video feed just got blocked here, West Coast, USA. If anybody else is having such a problem, please let me know. What was I talking about? I was talking about, our hierarchical structures. The lunar sage just joined in. Our hierarchical structures exist because we don't have alternative integrated models of how to cohere and collaborate and cooperate effectively at scale without such models. And our initial knee-jerk kind of appeal is to say, rip it all off, take it all away. And my argument is, use the internet as a mirror and look into that mirror, into the mirror of our collective consciousness, because that's what the internet is. It's a visible mirror, a digital copy of our collective consciousness. It's how we communicate. It's how we reason. It's what we think is funny. It betrays our level of maturity. It betrays our sanity and insanity. It betrays our ethics and alignment, and it betrays the way in which we're all fractured in that, right? And what it can show you if you look inside that mirror and you look honestly is that is a snapshot at any point in time on the people that you share this moment with, right? The people that you share this moment with, and you might be among them or you might be elevated in some way, are not capable of even leading themselves. They lack the sovereignty to understand how manipulated they are by social media and by political interests and corporate interests. They are not even aware of the strings that are pulling them, right? On some level, it isn't always an evil force in a back room rubbing its hands together, manipulating us. Just being a human being with an undiagnosed, primitive, animalistic hormone profile, neurological profile. We are fundamentally primitive creatures. And so much of what we do and our behavior and our storytelling, right, is invisible to us. It's below the waterline of our own self-awareness, right? In the spiritual community, they talk about shadow integration and inner child work, and there's a whole language set and a framework for this discovery of self, this inner world, this inner conversation. 99% of people that you can encounter on the street and have a conversation about this wouldn't even know what you're talking about. I went on holiday to Bali, which is a sort of island holiday location not far from us in Western Australia. And my wife and I met this lovely German couple who had a blonde daughter around the same age as our kid, and they were sort of playing together and eating ice cream and jumping in the pool. And because they were having a tough time, I said, come, I'll take you out and we'll go to dinner and I'll show you a few places, because they were struggling with the food there, right? And we get chatting over dinner, and I speak a bit of German, so I'm facilitating the conversation. And at some point I ask, and these are educated, intelligent, genteel, great social manners. These are otherwise evolved human beings, right? And I asked the husband and the wife, I said, what lights you guys up? What would you be doing with your life if you didn't have to work, or if you could work doing whatever you want? What's the dream or passion that sets your soul on fire? Like, what do you wish for yourself, psychologically, spiritually, whatever? And they both looked at me like I'd hit them in the face with a fish, right? They had never encountered that internal question, right? There are beautiful people out there with no internal life, no internal conversation, right? They don't even know what it means to be sovereign. They don't know what agency means in life. They are just following a congenial, traditional, cultural script. They're doing well, raising their kids, going to work, working in an office. And at no point in time in that entire journey does it ever occur to them that there's something deeper or more meaningful that might be going on in their lives. Completely oblivious. They read the news at the level of the headlines. They read stories at the level of what is transmitted visibly and obviously. There's no depth, there's no question, there's no wondering underneath all of that. So you don't even have to be a bad person to be unequal to the task of managing or leading yourself. Now, the majority of our population are combinations of either ethically misaligned, either too juvenile or adolescent to do that, or to care enough about a collective to behave appropriately. Right? We do not have rights and processes and institutions sufficient to initiate young people into an appropriate social context. Every single age, every single culture has young people. If you look in the UK and you look in America and you look in Australia and you look in South Africa, the young people are chaotically antisocial. Chaotically antisocial. The level of vitriol in them, the level of hubris in them, the level of propensity towards disrespect and violence. They've got no sense of mutual agency. They have no respect that somebody else is a self. They don't care about any social conventions. It's horrific. It's horrific and worse than I was as a kid. Worse than kids were when I was a kid. Whatever layers of decorum still existed where you would respect at least, you'd see a mum and a kid walking and you would ride around the mum and the kid. You wouldn't taunt the mum and the kid. These children on their e-scooters literally are taunting for their own pleasure while recording a woman a pregnant woman pushing a baby in a stroller or a little girl learning to ride her bicycle. Right. There's a fucking sickness out there. It's like Lord of the Flies, and we don't have the institutions to initiate these young people into a social coherence, right? And we don't have the social coherence to initiate them into. We are uninitiated. We're all adults, right? But we don't even understand the basics of what I've just explained at the moment, that we don't have a plan B for what happens beyond this, that we can't keep pulling in opposite political directions forever and hope that something's going to somehow resolve itself, or that politics is eventually going to catch its conscience and then someone's going to come along and fix it. No one else is coming now. This is the unraveling, right? There's nothing in the news headlines. There's nothing in the technology frontier. There's nothing in the philosophical frontier, in the literary frontier, in the religious frontier, in any way human beings have of organizing ourselves collectively or of solving problems. There's not a single thing out there that doesn't lead us further into a dystopian mess and a confusion and a chaos and an anarchy and a human beings. I say that history doesn't repeat itself, but it absolutely rhymes. Yeah, it absolutely rhymes. And so we know what human beings do when our forms of social leadership collapse. We know what happens. People don't suddenly find their good nature and all pull together in a kumbaya moment and share homegrown brinjals and rhubarbs with each other. Some people are wired to do that. But there are enough disenfranchised youth out there today, and enough bitter people out there, enough anarchists out there, enough confused people out there, enough people who are mentally unwell. Just mentally unwell. Just to be mentally unwell and to be suffering inside provides a human being enough internal forms of motivation to be destructive, antisocial, dangerous to themselves and others. We do not have anything that prepares us for what is happening next. James wrote something here. He said, "Oh my God, no internal life. What an amazing situation to shine a light on. Sadly, it's too prevalent. And in a way, it's the mental state of people entrained to accept being a slave at the bottom of a caste system. And it's too prevalent." That is part of the synopsis. It is part of the synopsis. But there is a gross lack of awareness of what our governments actually still do for us. Now, again, that's not a pass on how bad they are. We don't need no governments. We need better governments, right? But we need to become aware of what we're reliant on, because if you want to know what to do next, when you figure out, as I said before, what are all my blessings, what are the things I actually need and wish were here that I can currently still rely on, that's one pillar of relevance. So it's the blessings that I currently have. Number two, the second pillar is, what are the things that I long for being here in the world? Either a quality of leadership or a sense of community or a certain way that shops behave. Or I don't want to go to a comic club. I want to go to a philosophy club. I want to go there and attend the same way we go to an open mic night. I want to hear people saying interesting things. Whatever this thing is that you're longing for, that's your invitation to create it. So that's the column B response. The column A response, right, is to realize what's going to be lost and realize what we're missing in column B. And then that should be the core of the conversation of what we do, what we need to do. We need to, A, become aware of it. We need to share that awareness with others. We need to realize that this game of being on social media and having and people writing articles or just trying to grow their accounts. I want to know, so what? So that what? What are you growing your account for? Because the only legitimate use I find now of engaging other people's attention is to somehow be part of the solution, not just be mindlessly part of the problem. Yes, we still need entertainment. Yes, we still need healthy, wholesome forms of distraction. We need recreation. We absolutely need recreation. I'm going to read some comments in a second. But that shouldn't be our primary or our sole project. And we don't even recognize collectively the necessity that we have to press these platforms like Substack into service for the express need of talking to this vacuous ignorance that we share collectively, and start talking about that, and start talking about how weird things are, and start talking about how we lack the language, we lack the social norms, we lack the habits, we lack the capabilities in ourselves, right? And here's the second message that's proliferating up through the internet in our collective consciousness. It says, uh, you don't need to get consensus with anyone. You just need to figure yourself out, right? You just need to go and do the work, and you need to be whole. You don't need to follow teachers or gurus. And again, that is childishly idealistic. First of all, there's an enormous segment of our population that are unequal to the task of leading themselves. Secondly, if every single person, even if they're well-meaning and well armed with literature and examples, or they've got the time and the space to pursue a healthy course of self-actualization and self-realization, and deepen that inner conversation and grow their agency and grow their sovereignty and become aware of the strings that pull us, right? That is an enormous task that requires a lot of information and understanding. It requires expert guidance. We don't all have the time to work that out on our own journeys, right? And even if we do that, we lack the language afterwards to remain coherent socially at a scale of 9 billion people. So if you choose that route, yes, you save yourself. But that doesn't mean you ever become complicit in a collective problem solving, or a collective solution, or a collective direction that we want to all move and join. We lack a common language. We can't even use words like teacher or guru without getting some sort of recoil, gag reflex inside of us. Now, we didn't get to that gag reflex dishonestly. We've been shown again and again and again and again so many poor examples. But what fucking other words are you going to use for people whose authentic vocation is to help people discover their own forms of enlightenment, and to understand how to operate a human rig of this complexity? The limbic system, the neurochemical system, the hormone system, the behavioral psychology, the depth psychology. This isn't just something you can read books about, right? And then we can't all, this guy loves Nietzsche, and that guy loves Jung, and that guy loves Schopenhauer, and that guy loves something else. And then they've all got it all worked out. All right. But they still all talk past each other. There's well-meaning people on Substack today that can't get their shit together and can't cohere and can't collaborate, because they're all trying to nitpick each other's stitches that are made in the tapestry of an answer. Because, you call it this, but I call it that. And you're saying the same thing as me, but let me tell you what I understand. And we're just making more noise. And what we don't have is coherence. What we don't have is coherence. And there's a fact that is unarguable in science, in biology, in chemistry, in business, in economics, in the spiritual context, in a mystical context. And that fact is emergence. Reality is emergent. Evolution is a function of emergence. Iterative product releases of a piece of software, of an idea, everything is emergent. And the only way that things emerge is when they come together in parts that cohere in such a way that the coherence of those parts form a whole that is greater than the sum of its parts, and open a field of possibility that is not possible in any of these parts on their own, and was not possible before. Right. The universe will and won't allow certain things to emerge and continue emerging. Life on planet Earth will no longer continue to allow humanity to keep emerging the way we're doing. We're hitting against a wall, bounds, limits of correction and of necessity, right? We are living outside of relationship with what nature can accommodate. We are all stuck living on one planet Earth, which is a finite model of resources. It's a finite amount of space, and we have to cohere and share an ecosystem of engagement and communication and collaboration and cooperation in balance with what our ecosystem can actually afford to support. It is insane to carry on the way we're going on and assuming that extractive capitalism is going to work. And when somebody hears me critique extractive capitalism, they turn around and go, so what are you expecting? Socialism? Jesus Christ, guys. Just because one far shit idea on the left is unworkable does not mean I'm suggesting some far extreme unworkable solution on the right. Can we not admit that there is a transcendent better way? With all of our empowerment and all of our philosophy and all of our understanding and all of our spiritual intuition and all of our maturity and wisdom, can we not see that there has to be a better way? Anyway, that's the conversation I thought that I have in me today. I'd love questions. I'd love comments. I'd love engagement. But alas. Anyway, I've been prattling on for 41 minutes. For anybody who stuck around and enjoyed the chat or followed the chat, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I'll be back again tomorrow trying to export sanity and challenge some of our shittest ideas. And all of this is going somewhere. I think what's most important now is attracting other thought leaders, other poets, other artists, other wayfinders, other torchbearers, other writers to this moment. And I want to create a public speaking platform where it can be a little bit more structured, but we've got some really, really good voices coming through at the moment. And a big part of what I was talking about today is debunking a lot of bad ideas, a lot of incomplete or juvenile ideas. I think that's important, but I don't think it's the only thing that's important. I think some people know how to practice forms of mindfulness. We will talk, Judd. Forms of mindfulness at home and in their parenting and in their community and in their relationship that are actually constructive and convergent, right? There's ways to do this. And it's not enough that we just individually practice breathwork or we individually practice meditation or we individually practice yoga. Those things are starting points to get us to a place of stillness. Then we need to step through that threshold into the stillness and start deepening our internal conversation. That's where the shadow integration begins. That's where the inner child work begins. That's where the challenging of our story begins. That's where the discovery of our true heart's desire begins. And we need to find a new star to follow in the sky. Our old dream is dying. Now, for many of us, that dream died a long time ago. That dream died in childhood. For me, that dream died in childhood. For some people, they're only experiencing their first psychological trauma now. For some people, their entire youth has been a psychological trauma. For some reason, some people, every waking day, trying to operate in this world is a psychological trauma. James, I don't have a fixed time when I start broadcasting. I will have to get more regular at this, but I'm still trying to organize a social cadence in my own household, because our lives are so uncertain at the moment. So unfortunately can't give you a fixed answer on that, but I typically tend to do it in the mornings. Anyway, just to finish my point before I get to the notes, there are ways to do this. There's better and worse conversations to have. There's a deeper level of conversation to have, slightly more sophisticated. There's a lot of complexity to understand, and not everybody is on the same rung of the ladder in the same place of their journeys. But there is one common project here, right? And I want to help with that project in my own way. So I'd love everyone to stay part of it. And here's Kenshi. Okay, I'm going to respond to a question here. The question comes from Chan. Chan, just let me know if this is the question you're talking about. I always wonder what initiates the shift in perspective that is necessary to kickstart sovereignty of mind. It's trauma. Grief and trauma is that. Yeah? It's something I've mulled over at length. I could not have possibly developed the ability to become aware of myself as the witness of my own mind any earlier than I did. Yeah, we need a kind of resistance, Chan. So if you think of like a seed with a husk over it, like a wheat kernel, right? With the husk over it. We say that at the end of a harvest. So think about the journey of a seed, right? The first act of a seed is to become separate from the whole. It falls away from the tree, or whatever the case. And that's its first act of abandonment, right? And in that, it doesn't realize that the gift that it got is this shell, this husk that it has around it to protect it, right? And it actually gets swallowed up by the earth. And when some natural signal arrives, it has to make as a first choice the choice to break apart and break open and release itself from that husk. And it wants to break for the light and the surface, right? But the first thing it actually needs to do is put a taproot down. So that's the deep subconscious work, right? So you can see where that's going, right? Shift that picture and consider now this wheat stalk that's grown up throughout a whole summer season, and it's fought its way towards the sun. It's endured rains and storms and wind, and now it's standing proud and strong. And the next thing, the farmer, the harvester, the great harvester, comes and cuts all the sheaves down. And this is now the second trauma, because everything that it had grown itself up into, suddenly now the carpet is pulled out from underneath its feet, and it's now almost as if a nothing. And it tells itself, surely this is the end. But remember, when it fell from the tree or from the wheat stalk in the first place as a seedling, it told itself this was the end, right? And when it got swallowed up by the earth, it told itself this was the end. And there's part of the seed that when it first broke open, told itself, now this was the end. But every time that's only the beginning, you see? And then this wheat stalk is now tall, and then the wheat the heads of grain are now removed from the sheaves, right? And they left to dry in the warehouse. And then eventually they're taken and they're threshed. Threshing is what happens, because threshing removes the husk and releases the kernel, right? So the answer to your question is threshing. Threshing needs to happen. Trauma causes that. Resistance with life causes that. Our various mishaps and misadventures in life help cause that. And we think that life is some sort of grand punishment, or that there's been some terrible mistake. But in fact, it's precisely all of those actions that are helping to release us into a kind of the invitational form of our own becoming, yeah, our own actualization. So I'll finish your question. I could not have possibly developed the ability to become aware of myself as the witness of my own mind any earlier than I did. No, because willingness is not enough. We have to be ready. And it's life that makes us ready. Someone could have slapped me in the face with a magic fish of awareness, and it would have meant nothing to me until it did. That's readiness, right? The wheat had to be ready to be cut down. It had to be ready to be threshed. So it first has to be dried out. And we can't choose that readiness. Yeah? How do you suppose we collectively shepherd that awareness to people who still think you are speaking to them in a language from another planet? We can't do that. All we can do is make the cradle ready. All we can do is make the quarantine tent ready for the sick that are coming to be healed. All we can do is make the beachhead of sanity, of maturity, of community, to arrive the ones that are waking up and struggling through the storm, so that when they get there, they can realize, this is the way human beings behave. This is where human beings are going. And we have to figure that out. And we have to do that in our relationships. We have to do that in ourselves. We have to do that in our communities. We have to do that nationally and globally. But what I'm trying to do is create that cradle here first, and let enough people of goodwill put their hand up and say, I would like to be part of that solution. I would like to figure out how to steer that process in myself. And yes, I am going to need help. I am going to have to grow up and realize I can't do the whole journey on my own. Not everybody has the dharma of becoming a lone wolf or the solo mystic. And people who are telling you that that's the only way, it's the only way for them. It's not the only way for everybody, right? How do you suppose we collectively shepherd that awareness to people who are still think you are speaking to them in a language from another planet. We can't persuade people. We can't persuade people. And I've realized this is that I actually need to change my language from persuasiveness to explaining. Let me explain to you what's going on. If there's a resonance inside of you and you're getting this, you'll get it, right? That is a testament to your readiness. And you can only make common purpose with people who are ready to make common purpose with. You can only collaborate meaningfully in a project that you are ready to collaborate meaningfully in. The problem is life is going to make us ready. And we've arrived here, for better or worse, in this moment in history, in this moment in time. And I believe we've chosen somehow to be here, some part of us that knows better. Just like the wheat seed that got thrown in the floor and then got grazed up and then got cut down. No point of that was a terrible mistake. It was all somehow intentional. And we've chosen to come here at exactly this troubling moment, right? And it's going to occur in waves. The calamity is going to occur in waves, and therefore the awakening is going to occur in waves. But the awakening is not enough, because all awakening does is put you beyond the story, out into the edge of oblivion where there is no structure and story. The veil of reality is completely lifted. And what human beings don't realize is we need story to be able to mitigate and moderate our sanity. Because as the nihilists pointed out, pure freedom is terror. Because when you don't know what to do, which way to go, which way is up, which way is down, which way is right, which way is tomorrow, it's like being in the middle of an eclipse. And you cannot feel safe until you know which way to turn so you can face dawn, because you want to head towards tomorrow, right? But if you look at the rim of darkness that you're in, there's a light on the edge of everything. And everyone currently on the internet is arguing for you to move in a different direction. And that's how you know you need to become the light. That's how you know. That's how you know. That's how you know where we are. That's how you know what's happening. And every single person that goes through an initial rude awakening arrives at that frontier. Yeah. And they reach out on the internet, and what do they find? They find a conspiracy theory. They find some extremist view. They find some spiritual thread. And then they believe that's the whole of the answer. They don't understand that we still have to weave a parachute out of all these disparate threads so that humanity can move forward from here. Anyway, I think I've said enough, and I don't know if I've got all the comments. Tom, what about the rising literacy we are seeing in society? How do you reach people who can't or won't read? Sorry, the rising illiteracy. I don't know, Tom. I've got some ideas, but we can still connect to those people via story, you know? And if we're doing things right, and if we have the time, these sorts of ideas need to make their way into music and art and movies. We can't all talk in lectures like this. There's too many of us, and it doesn't make sense. We need stories. We need storytellers. We need myth weavers. Because the only people that can thread those disparate threads together are myth weavers, storytellers, artists, musicians. Yeah, we need them now more than ever. Yeah. All right, folks. Story is how consciousness relates to itself. Absolutely. And what we've got upside down stories, and we're not initiated into the veracity and the depth and the eternal nature of our archetypal structures. Yeah. And we need to become reacquainted with them. And that is what Apocalypse does. It makes us reacquainted with those things in a very, very challenging and difficult way. But that's the medicine. Yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. This has gone way, way longer than I need to. I know in the other room, my wife is going to be hungry and ready for breakfast, so I better pack up and get going. But I've really appreciated all the engagement and the questions. And I think this format actually works better than sitting outside. So I'll maybe do this again. Look, and I also need help. I need help chunking these things into little bits. I need your help by liking and commenting on this and sharing this. I need just hit that like button, not because I need the validation, but because unless the people that show up actually vote with their feet, I don't have the opportunity to convince the algorithm and the platform and the system that this is worth listening to. I can't do that. And you have to be complicit in that, right? And then I'd like to do proper lecture series, and I'd like to invite other speakers to come and talk. And I'd like to get a course going or a practice workshop going where we can dive into some of these things and figure out. I've got a lot of stuff figured out, but so have other people. And there's better and worse ways of implementing these things. And we can get together in practice circles and we can talk about these ideas. But I also need digital help. I need someone who can help me chunk these things up and blast them on Instagram or even on Substack. I don't really want to do that, right? I've got other things that I can do better to be part of the solution, but there's somebody out there that's kick-ass at sound engineering or desktop publishing or online marketing or whatever the hell it is, right? But please, can you help me? Please, can you help me do this? Yeah. Anyway, reach out to me on message. Thank you for the engagement. Have a beautiful evening, and I'll see you here tomorrow. Thanks. How do I end this thing now? End. The end.